is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Sunday in November to break down the Ravens' ugly but important 23-16 win over the Cleveland Browns. We're going to break this down from every angle, talk about a stellar performance from the defense, a not so stellar performance from the offense, and of course, we'll talk about Mark Andrews' hurricane fake tush push rushing touchdown. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsors.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, I don't quite know why, but the Ravens seem to play their worst football once a year against the Cleveland Browns. They are usually good for one terrific win over their AFC North rival, and they're also good for one god-awful performance, but it doesn't matter this time because the Ravens eke out a 23-16 win to sweep their season series against Cleveland for the first time since 2020. Jonas, you were there in Cleveland. You're all bundled up. You've got your hat on. It looked chilly. It looked windy. I'm a little sad that we aren't seeing your beautiful haircut, which our own Gianna Hahn gave us a preview of on Slack, but hopefully by the end of the podcast, I can get you to take off your beanie. Jonas, doesn't matter how you get there. I said this last week when we were previewing this game. Doesn't matter how ugly it was going to get. Doesn't matter the margin of victory. The Ravens had to win this game to get to 500 and to keep pace with the Steelers. They did just that today.
Yeah, it was something. It was I'm still trying to process exactly what happened, exactly what we saw, but a win is a win is a win, and you would rather win 4 ugly games and get to 500 than try to juke your pretty football score and be stuck at 4-6 or 3-7. So this is a long season. We have talked endlessly about how these are the kind of games that the Ravens of better, more recent vintage have lost in infuriating fashion. And I think that the Browns fans in attendance, and I'm sure a couple thousand Ravens fans as well, who were here in Cleveland, probably saw that scoreline being what it was there in the fourth quarter, end of the third, early in the fourth, and thought, man, it's really going to happen again for the Browns' favor or for the Ravens' detriment. And I can't say that that I wasn't among them. I think probably the biggest saving grace for the Ravens was the fact that Dylan Gabriel was out of there, and the Ravens, all they had to do basically once they saw that the score was 16-10 was somehow get into overtime or get a touchdown or do something to overcome that, because it felt honestly really, really hard. Barring a Ravens turnover in their own territory, it felt really, really unlikely that the Browns were going to score again, just because this offense felt so disadvantaged with Shedeur Sanders out there with the run game kind of grinding to a halt after that first quarter. So the Ravens had to do what they had to do to pull ahead, and it turns out that it was hurricane.
It was hurricane. That's our word of the day, Jonas, because that was the name of the fake tush push rushing touchdown for Mark Andrews in this game. I wonder if all of the failed tush pushes to Mark Andrews that were called earlier this season made it worth it, because the Ravens end up getting the play. They get the first down. They get a touchdown when it matters the most. The Ravens were hoping to pull off a second half comeback in this game. They're down 16-10 at halftime. They kick a couple field goals in the fourth quarter after a scoreless third quarter, and they are in desperate need of picking up a 4th and 1 in Browns territory. And they line up for the tush push with Mark Andrews under center. The Ravens had struggled all game and frankly all season in running the ball in short yardage situations. We've seen the tush push be used to some success and to some failure. And Mark Andrews takes the ball, spins around, runs not only for the first down, but for the touchdown, or who's got it better than award, has to go to Mark Andrews, who not only scored the game-winning touchdown in this game, Jonas, but became the Ravens' all-time leader in receiving yards, too. 5,806 after tonight and counting. It's got to feel good for Mark Andrews, who, no, he's not going to be able to bury the disaster in Buffalo from 11 months ago until they get to the playoffs. But he has been through a lot over these last 11 months, and it has to feel good for a guy who hasn't quite had a signature play this season and what could be his final season for the Ravens until tonight.
Yeah, I mean, he's continuing to score touchdowns. This has been a disappointing year in general in the receiving category for the Ravens tight ends. Like, another anonymous game from Isaiah Likely, not a high volume game for Mark Andrews. Charlie Kohler's been hit or miss as the third tight end there, and obviously you don't expect a whole lot more than 1 or 2 checkdowns every 4 games for Pat Ricard. So this passing game is still finding its way over the middle with the group that we thought would be one of the NFL's best, just in general. Like, what other teams have that depth there? What other teams had a setting playmaker like Isaiah Likely, plus a kind of do-it-all guy in Charlie Kohler, plus a 300-pound smash mouth fullback in Pat Ricard, plus Mark Andrews, who looked good in training camp, if not his vintage self. So I think this probably was a nice touchstone moment for Mark Andrews. It's still going to be hard for Ravens fans to forget exactly what happened in Buffalo, 10 months ago at this point, 9 months ago?
Yeah, 11, whatever.
What is that?
10. Probably 10.
Yeah, let's go with 10. 10 sounds good. 10's a round number. And it's, he looked fast, and I kind of go back to him going up before the Vikings game a couple weeks ago, when we all thought that he would break the receiving record that week, and said, like, you look at my tracking data, you look at my MPH scores, and I'm running faster than I ever have before. And I know you don't want to make too much of what we see in practice, but you see him like running these wind sprints, and he does look fast. And I was reminded of that watching him today, watching him, break out into the open field, stretch those legs, and really turn it up. Like, I don't have access to the tracking data, but John Harbaugh was, I think, saying, like, he had to be over 20, 21 miles per hour on that one, which is, that's what Derrick Henry hit on that 59-yard run down the right sideline. He really got down there, and it super, super quickly. And Lord knows the Ravens needed him to milk every yard possible, because I don't think, they still could have won had they only settled for a field goal if he'd gotten knocked out at the 5-yard line or the 2-yard line. But man, it's a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush at this point when it comes to the Ravens in the red zone woe. So he looked fast, he looked explosive, he had a great down block from Charlie Kohler, great lead block from Pat Ricard there on, I think, Grant Delpit it was, who ironically knocked out, if you remember that touchdown from Mark in that game in week 2 in Baltimore, like the would-be Mark Andrews touchdown in the back of the end zone in that low red zone play. I think it was Delpit who knocked that ball loose. So a small measure of revenge for the Ravens tight ends to kind of help clear path for Mark on that tight end, on that tush-push hurricane play.
And credit where it's due. Todd Monken with a heck of a play call. Not a clean game offensively by any stretch for the Ravens, and the play calling in particular did not look great for the vast majority of this game, and yet he pulled out the best play call when they needed it the most. I can't help but think in the moment, can you imagine if they did not get that? If Mark Andrews is stuffed in the backfield for 5 yards, there's a moment there where if that goes awry, that play ends up looking terrible. But you asked John Harbaugh after the game, Jonas, is that a play call where you are worried about the negative in that instance? Is it a higher risk play because you're not pushing everybody forward, because Mark Andrews has to spin, turn around, and go backwards for a few yards before he goes forwards? It's one of those plays where it ends up working out, and it becomes kind of a touchstone moment that I think fans will look back on in this season favorably, but it could have gone badly. It definitely could have gone badly.
And I don't know if this is just a kind of bunker mentality from the Ravens offensive guys. Like, Pat Ricard told us that they only put in the hurricane play this week, which is a little bit fresh to be, repping it that few times and be calling it in that high leverage of a spot. credit to the Ravens for having the confidence to do that. Credit to Todd Monken for installing it in such a way where you can be confident enough that you can go to that play call in a 4th and 1, got to have a situation like that. But I think probably the most eye-raising detail, Paul, for that I gathered post game was, like we asked Kyle Hamilton post game how many times he can recall seeing it in practice, and sometimes in practice you get ones against ones, but a lot of times it is just your offense against the scout team defense, your first team defense against the scout team offense. So I saw Keandre Jackson, who had another strong special teams day, but usually works, you would think, as the scout team cornerback, and he did say that he does have some scout team work on the defense there. I asked him, like, hey, I would assume that you're part of the group of guys that is going against this play call. Like, what did you see? What did you think of it when you saw it in practice? He's like, hey man, I want to be honest with you. That's the first time in my life I've ever seen that play call. So obviously the Ravens practiced it enough, maybe in like walkthroughs or practices, that there was comfort and familiarity for these guys to run it to perfection. Like Derrick Henry was kind of sternly telling us post game, like, we repped it enough times, we repped it to perfection to the point where we could reliably gain the yard or so that we did. And obviously they got more than a yard, but it was a little bit things that make you file it under things that make you go, huh, where Keandre Jackson, who, as far as I know, has had practice perfect attendance the past couple of weeks, could not for the life of him remember seeing that play being called in practice.
It worked, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. And the Ravens won the game.
History is written by the victors, right?
You're exactly right. Jonas, before that amazing play, this game was 3 sheets to the wind. This game was just all over the place. The first half in particular was particularly ugly. The Ravens just handing the Browns good field position, handing the Browns points. The Ravens the Browns, I should say, score 13 points off turnovers or dumb mistakes by the Ravens. There is the pick six that bounces off the hands of Keaton Mitchell, which maybe was thrown 6 inches too high, but that is absolutely on Keaton Mitchell. Ball pops up in the air. It's picked up by Devin Bush, who takes it into the end zone. Some poor tackling by some Ravens offensive players, but that's not their primary side of the ball. That's a pick six. That gives the Browns 7 points. You also saw the muffed punt by LaJohntay Wester. It looked incredibly windy out there. He was very aggressive in taking that first punt return that he grabbed inside his own 5-yard line, and that worked out fine. And we know he's a rookie. We know that he's very aggressive, and when he does get the ball with a head of steam, he can take it the distance, but that was an ugly play. Gives the Browns the ball inside the 10-yard line. Fortunate that the Ravens are able to come out of there with the Browns only getting 3 points in that instance, but that was another instance where the Ravens shot themselves in the foot. And then a drive where the Browns end with a field goal is helped saved by a Jake Hummel offsides on a punt. The Ravens were not doing themselves any favor in this game, and you came into this game knowing Browns are starting Dylan Gabriel in this game. If they have any shot of winning, they have to have some weird stuff happen. And the weird stuff was happening very frequently, especially in the first half in this game, and it just felt like everything was bouncing against the Ravens.
Yeah, and you think about just how slim these margins are and just what plays in retrospect end up being hugely consequential. And for the Ravens, despite all that offensive toil and the offensive weirdness, like just think how big it was that the Ravens, after what the Browns took over at the 7 or the 6 yard line after that muff punt, like they did not give up a touchdown, and that ended up being so big. I know they ended up winning by a touchdown, so it would have only been like a 4-point difference, and it wouldn't have changed the calculus for the Browns as they were going downfield on that final drive. But that the psychological difference of only being down 13-3 after that pick six as opposed to 17-3, I think probably can't be overstated, and it would have been 20-10 at halftime after that Andre Schmidt 46 yarder in that final minute. So the Ravens defense did not have a flawless first quarter. The Ravens defense, I think we can probably get into just the overall luck of this particular second half with Dylan Gabriel being knocked out, but they did more than enough to be able to get their hands on this game and call that win theirs. I mean, they were so clearly the best unit on the field, I think, considering just how, the Ravens, for all their, uh, for all their ups and downs, they were at least able to get into the Browns' red zone enough times where you felt like this Browns defense was a little bit vulnerable. And certainly the Ravens had a much easier foe on defense compared to what the Browns were going up against. So maybe I should walk it back a little bit and say that the Ravens defense and the Browns defense were clearly the best units on the field in a tie for first. But, to allow close to 200 yards total, what did they end up being?
187
yards total, 3.5 yards per play. I think before that final drive, it was 3.2 yards per play. Other than that short little sequence of Quinshon Judkins runs and, one or two nice completions from Dillon Gabriel, it felt like the Ravens just had Cleveland completely bottled up, completely figured out. There was just nothing that this Browns offense could do to really move the ball downfield reliably after that first quarter.
Yeah, not only did the Browns lose Dillon Gabriel halfway through this game as he was being evaluated and then ruled out with that concussion, they also lost starting tackle Cam Robinson. So they were hurting, especially on that side of the ball. And this was an offensive line that was among the league's worst coming into this game. This was a wide receiver crew that was among the league's worst. What they did have going for them was rookie running back Quinshon Judkins, and he broke off some nice runs in the first half, but they held him to 59 yards on 17 carries in this game. The quarterback play was just abysmal all around. I mean, Dillon Gabriel, 7 for 10 for 68 yards in the first half. Shedeur Sanders makes his much ballyhooed NFL debut, finishes 4 for 16 for 47 yards and an interception. Cleveland was 0 for their first 7 third down attempts. They finished 2 for 14 on third down attempts. Jonas, if you have the option of going to either a healthy Dillon Gabriel or a healthy Shedeur Sanders, if you're Kevin Stefanski, who are you going to next week?
Is Joe Flacco not an answer?
He is not, unfortunately. He played, I think he played pretty poorly for the Bengals today. They finished with 9 points in their loss to the Steelers, which we will get to.
The uncomfortable question, the counterfactual that is impossible to prove. So why even bother waste any breath about it is if Dillon Gabriel's brain does not get hurt in that first half, do the Ravens win this game?
I still think so. I mean, Dillon Gabriel he threw his longest completion of his career in this game, which was like a 26-yarder up the seam. But we all know Dillon Gabriel lacks arm strength. We all saw him be very inaccurate. All three, I should say, quarterbacks in this game, and we'll get to Lamar's performance, were kind of shoddy. Do you chalk some of that up to the wind in this game, Jonas? Because it just looked like nobody was particularly accurate today.
Yeah, I mean, 20 to 25 mile winds is a nuisance, but not enough to, I think, materially change the flight of the ball. I think we just saw inaccurate quarterback play on both sides. I mean, Shedeur, I don't think he's going to be in the mix for QB1 in 2026. I'm going to go out on a ledge and say that right now. Minus 0.67 EPA per play. Obviously, that is heavily influenced by that pick thrown to Nate Wiggins, who, as Kyle Hamilton said, sure loves picking off the Browns players. But his completion percentage, 26.7, is minus 34.8 percentage points below the expected completion percentage. So it is unbelievably difficult to get that far away from the model baseline. So that gives you a sense of just how poor this Browns defense was, or this Browns offense was. I mean, obviously he only took, I think, the 2 sacks, but he also had the intentional grounding, and that is the asset that Dillon Gabriel has on Shedeur Sanders at this point. That's what I think defined the struggles of the Shedeur Sanders preseason experience was he can be accurate when he's given time and he's playing preseason level defenders, but when he's not accurate and you have pressure in his face and you have guys making a beeline for him and they're often unblocked, then can he really do enough to avoid negatives? And I think that was the calculus that the Ravens made. Even on that final drive, they are just sending the house on every other play because they don't think that he's going to be able to stand in there, go through his reads or make the right play call. And he almost made the crucial over the top touchdown pass to, who was it? Was it Bond or Tillman or Jerry?
I think it was Bond.
That Cheeto breaks up, and then there's also the throw just out of the reach of the receiver, lands out of bounds in the end zone on another deep shot. But I think the Ravens just made the ultimately correct but certainly risky decision that we don't think this guy has what it takes, even though we don't have Marlon Humphrey. We don't think this guy has what it takes to limit negative plays in all facets. And I don't know if they would have made that same kind of risky decision making if Dylan Gabriel was back there.
Yeah, it was a nerve-wracking final drive for Cleveland. I mean, the Ravens take the lead with the Mark Andrews hurricane play, but the Browns came down the field and had a real opportunity to tie this game up or maybe take the lead with a 2-point conversion. That missed throw by Shedeur Sanders kind of on the run. He was under pressure, but if he makes the right throw there, that could be a touchdown. And then the great pass breakup by Chidobe Awuzie, playing more snaps today in the stead of Marlon Humphrey. How about Keon Martin? Not only a pass breakup on the goal line in this game, but also had a sack in this game. Good for the rookie to log some.
Good for the undrafted rookies.
Yeah.
Yeah, just good for the undrafted. I mean, obviously, it sucks for the Ravens to have lost Jay Higgins for a little bit with that knee injury, but you're getting, great contributions from Keandre Jackson. You're getting great contributions from Keon Martin. Obviously, they were hoping to have some of the other guys who they kept on their season opening 53 before they got poached by other teams because they had to make some roster moves. But even if this draft class hasn't been the A+ smashing success that the Ravens would have liked it to be, they're definitely getting enough cheap contributions from the top of that draft class. And some of the undrafted guys today as well. So, shout out to Keon Martin, who just does not look like your typical slot cornerback, but he's the ball player, man. He knows what to do to get his nose around the ball.
Let's talk about the offense because it was not all sunshine and roses on that side of the ball. Lamar Jackson finishes 14 of 25 for 193 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I believe that's the first time in his career that he's finished with no passing touchdowns and 2 interceptions. The interceptions were not his fault, especially the first one, which I said bounces off the hands of Keaton Mitchell. The other one bounces off the helmet of one of his offensive linemen, I believe, before it is intercepted. Roger Rosengarten. So neither of those interceptions, I don't think, could be chalked up to Lamar, but took 5 sacks, 4 of which came from Myles Garrett. He ran the ball just 4 times for 10 yards. To me, he looked just very uncomfortable in the pocket. And maybe it was just the constant worry that Myles Garrett was going to come around the edge and get home, but some of his throws were off the mark, I think, because he hurried them, because he didn't set his base. This is 2 games in a row. I mean, he got the ball out a lot quicker against Minnesota. He didn't finish with a great stat line against the Vikings, but you can, at least say that he was getting the ball out quickly. He was not getting the ball out quickly, and this looked like the Lamar Jackson we saw against the Lions, where he's holding the ball, and taking perhaps an unnecessary sack.
Yeah, I asked him post game if there was a kind of common theme, a common denominator to those 4 sacks or the 5 sacks. I forget which one, which
5
group
sacks.
I specified. Well, but like the 4 by Myles Garrett, because those were not like Myles Garrett running through Ronnie Stanley's face. Those were not, Myles Garrett cross stepping around someone like we've seen so often against lesser offensive linemen. Like those were him just retracing his pass rush path and then finding a way to the quarterback because Lamar still hadn't been able to get rid of the ball. And Lamar said those are the kind of plays that Cleveland makes. Those are the kind of chaos. That's the kind of chaos that the Browns can create with this defense and Myles Garrett. And to an extent, that is correct. But like there's a reason why Myles Garrett, other than that 5 sack game against the Patriots, is typically a guy who's going to have like between a half sack to 1.5 sacks per game. And that's because, quarterbacks typically get rid of the ball. And I think Lamar said that the Browns were physical with their zone drops, knocking guys out of their kind of route distributions, which maybe threw off the rhythm of some passing plays. And obviously, I don't have access to the All-22 right now. John Harbaugh wouldn't have had access to the All-22 to get asked exactly what was dysfunctional with the Ravens drop back passing game. But like at a certain point, you kind of have to make the decision, am I going to keep this running back in for additional pass protection, or am I going to send him out to the flats as like a check down in case Myles Garrett wins again? And it seems like the Ravens just kind of made enough losing bets where they could end up with Lamar finishing with 5 sacks. So, it's worrisome that he is already, I mean, I don't have his his season-long stats handy, but he's probably already pretty close to what he finished with last year in terms of total sacks.
He's at the exact same number, 23.
There you go. And that's with him missing a handful of games already and us only being at week 11. So, there are fluctuations to this thing. Josh Allen has been going through the same thing in Buffalo where, a guy who, like Lamar, had just a ridiculous like pressure to sack ratio where he was just like one of every 25 pressure dropbacks would end up with a sack. And Lamar wasn't quite as good as Josh Allen was last year, but it felt close to that. And we've seen both of those guys kind of regress in a negative way. And obviously they're still the conductors of two fantastic offenses, but it's really, really tough for this offense to stay on schedule when you take sacks. And they took a lot of sacks today.
The one thing that was a lot better in this game, as opposed to their week 2 win over the Browns, the running game was a lot better. Not coming from the legs of Lamar Jackson, who there are going to be questions about the lack of designed runs and his lack of running until he answers them with a breakout game on the ground. And that was not today. But other than him, Derrick Henry ripped off that 59-yarder en route to 103 rushing yards on the day for him. Ravens finish with 30 carries for 184 yards, 35 of them coming from the legs of Mark Andrews, which I don't think anybody expected. The running game was at least a little bit better than it was back in week 2. And I think that was a major cause for concern 9 weeks ago. And at least it looked a lot better today.
Yeah. And I think, we talked about it on the pod on Thursday. Like when you went back and looked at the tape from week 2, Todd Monken was doing things that conceptually were the right thing to do. Like it's this penetrating, attacking Browns front. They have the wide 9 alignments. You have the defensive ends, set up pretty far wide from the offensive tackles. They're relying on those linebackers to come up and fit the run. They're hoping to get into the backfield. They're not really a bend but don't break type of thing. And Todd Monken called a lot of those trap wham concepts where you're inviting the defensive line to come up field because you know that you're going to have a counter to them and you're allowing your offensive linemen to get to that second level. It's the kind of runs, if people are wondering, who like the Ravens just bashed the Houston Texans with in that Christmas Day game last year that were just so effective. Like, you guys want to get upfield? Okay, boom, we're going to have this change it for you. And it's going to be 7 to 8 yards downfield before anyone even lays a hand on Derrick Henry. And the Ravens didn't have as many explosive plays running those kind of run concepts against the Browns today. But I think Todd Monken, as a run game caller, I think had a really, really good game today, just with being able to stay on schedule, knowing, that Cleveland would continue to want to get upfield, was going to want to continue to, stack those TFLs. And I think he did a good job of putting Keith Mitchell in positions to succeed, Derrick Henry in positions to succeed. Sure, there were still an unwanted number of 1 yard losses, zero yard runs that did set this offense back. But I think for the most part, the Ravens had to be over the moon happy about doing what they did against this Browns run defense. I mean, like, they had a 44% run success rate against this Browns team. I think that came into week 11 second in the NFL in run success rate, second in the NFL in yards per allowed. So they had to be really, really, really happy just with how healthy this run game looked against a very, very, very stout Browns front.
For sure. And without Justice Hill as well. All right. We are going to take a look at where this win places the Ravens in the AFC North and talk about that Pittsburgh game on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, the Ravens needed this win not only to get to 500, but they needed this win to keep pace with a Steelers team that got a 34-12 win over the Cincinnati Bengals. That improves Pittsburgh to 6-4 on the season. The devastating news, or I don't know if it's devastating, depending on how you look at it, is Aaron Rodgers left that game with injury, was replaced by Mason Rudolph, and appears, according to ESPN, to maybe have a slight break in his left wrist. He has not been having a good season at all this season. I know a lot of Pittsburgh fans have been calling for his benching anyway, but the Steelers losing Aaron Rodgers, despite the fact that they got the win, we talked about how pretty much no matter what, this division is going to come down to those two matchups between these two teams, the first of which coming in 3 weeks. But this is going to be a fascinating final month and a half of the season here.
Yeah. Let me put on my nerd hat and go back to the New York Times playoff simulator with the win today. The Ravens are up to 77% odds to win the division, which is probably like 50% more than it was when they were 1-5. If they take care of business against the Jets and the Steelers lose to the Bears next weekend because Aaron Rodgers is out and let's say Caleb Williams goes off, then those odds go up to 86%. Obviously, baked into that calculus is just the notion that the Ravens are better than the Steelers, and so much of this hangs on how the Ravens do against the Steelers. But I think not to look too far ahead, and Lamar being the kind of king of perspective that he is, when I asked him post game, like, how much better what does it mean to be? I asked him what confidence was there in the Ravens getting to 5-5 when they were 1-5. I was like, well, before we could get to 1-5, we had to get to 2-5, and before we could get to 5-5, we had to get to 3-5, and just kind of taking that game by game mentality that us sitting in the cheap seats and then the press box are not really all that keen on taking, but it's true. And I think the hope, I guess, if you're a Ravens fan, is just like that this Ravens season continues to go so splendidly well that by the time you get to that second Steelers game, it doesn't matter what Pittsburgh does, because the Ravens will have already wrapped up the AFC North. But I mean, like, any way you can think about it, if the Ravens are within a game of the Steelers in either way, whether they're a game ahead, even, or a game back of the Steelers before the regular season finale, then that finale is going to matter. So the Ravens will take whatever advantage they can get, whether that comes from, crazy hurricane play calls, or whether that comes from Aaron Rodgers getting hurt. Beggars can't be choosers at this point. That they need to find a way to win this AFC North, because they can't really take any chances with them being able to get a wild card with how competitive just the conference is, with everyone kind of bunched together. But it's hard to feel bad about where the Ravens stand right now, considering their momentum and what Pittsburgh is going through, especially on offense.
You know who else is 5-5, by the way? The Chiefs are 5-5 after they lost today. We said it a few days ago, but if I were a Ravens fan, I don't care how you get these wins. I really don't. Like, just win these football games. This season, beggars can't be choosers, like you said, Jonas. The season has been a disaster pretty much from the start. So if you can somehow scrape together enough wins in the second half here to overcome a ridiculously poor 1-5 start and get into the playoffs, that is worth however you get there. And who is going to care that this win over the Browns in Cleveland was especially ugly? The thing is, the point is they won this game, and that's what matters. Next two games for Pittsburgh, by the way, at Chicago, home against Buffalo. Mason Rudolph looking like he will start at least one of those games. Ravens' next two games before they face the Pittsburgh Steelers are at home against the Jets and at home against the Bengals on Thanksgiving.
Paul, imagine us getting on this podcast after week 4 and saying that come a week 11, the Ravens would have almost 25 percentage points better chances of making the playoffs. The Ravens right now, overall percentage odds of making the playoffs, not the AFC North, just the playoffs, 79%. The Chiefs, after today's loss, down to 57%, which is pretty incredible, considering only 2 weeks ago people were saying that, oh yeah, pencil them in for another trip to the AFC Championship game.
I still don't know who is the favorite in this AFC. I mean, the Patriots are 9-2. That looks like the most fraudulent 9-2 I think I've ever seen. The Broncos are 9-2. That does not look like a great football team in Denver either. So I really don't know who's going to come out of this conference. But we will see how the next few weeks shape up. Jonas, you were not tuned into the broadcast because you were watching the game with your own eyeballs in Cleveland, but you missed a Progressive commercial. You know how they have the that series of commercials about backup quarterbacks coming in and saving the day in regular life situations. Tyler
Mhm.
Huntley and his shiny, shiny teeth in him were in a commercial where he is tapping in for a father who's trying to explain the birds and the bees to his son.
Oh, nice. I've seen those
Yeah.
commercials. I've not seen the Tyler Huntley version.
It was the first time I saw that one. It was interesting, an interesting situation for the Ravens' backup quarterback to be put in there.
Tyler Huntley's
He
got
did very well.
It's got a megawatt smile. Imagine saying no
does.
to a guy like that.
He does. I hope he got compensated well for that commercial. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. We will have so much more coverage on thebanner.com where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Banner.
Jonas is writing a story as we speak. Gianna Hahn is in Cleveland as well, writing a story. Childs Walker will have his 5 things. Kyle Kuhn will have a column. All of that good stuff you can get on thebanner.com. And tell your friends about the Banner Ravens podcasts. Get it anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Spotify, SoundCloud, all that good stuff. Watch it on X, Facebook, YouTube, or Instagram. Jonas,
Paul, should we tease what we're maybe doing on Tuesday?
What are we maybe doing on Tuesday?
Taking a field trip to Northern Virginia.
Oh, that's right. I almost forgot about this. The Banner Ravens podcast on the road. Should we do an episode on the road here? To get you describe it because you're writing the story that.
Well, I don't want to give the story idea away, so I'm a little bit.
You said you want to tease it.
Yeah, I know. But tease it doesn't mean like do a full strip tease. I'm just a little tease. Show a little nipple, you know.
The tease here is that one of us may have to be shirtless for this video, and I know it's not going to be me. The people are going to want to come to see Jonas Shaffer. I'll tell you that much.
Your Catholic guilt wouldn't allow it.
All right, we'll have more podcasts for you this week. At the very latest, we will see you Thursday to preview the Ravens game against the New York Jets. For